Hello, everyone. Very pleased to see you here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Catherine Poujol, professor of History of Central Asia at the French Institute of Oriental Languages and Civilizations in Paris. Former director of IFEAC, which is the French Institute of Central Asian Studies in Bishkek, and I just back for 4 years there. My first trip to the region, to Central Asia, was in September 1979, while Central Asia was a part of Soviet Union, and almost no foreign policy was done, except a few diplomats from Islamic countries coming to Tashkent to attend Islamic conferences, just to concretize the USSR policy towards Arab countries. From that date, I can say that I was a kind of witness of the last decades of the Soviet Union, the so-called Brezhnev stagnation, then the perestroika, Gorbachev perestroika, and then the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then the first year of independence until today. So I can say that I remember pretty well the appearance of the first ambassadors from Central Asia in France, for instance, the creation of the frontiers in the Fergana Valley, where the guards say, "Excuse me, we have to open your case, your car, because it's a frontier," although nothing was visible at that time. It was pretty interesting. I remember this time. My purpose today is to present you the international relations in Central Asia with a focus on foreign policies from 1991 until 2020. So you understand that it's a very big deal, very difficult to try to trace this question for 5 countries, 5 states in Central Asia, 30 years. The chapter will be around 30 pages, and we will talk about 1 hour. So we definitely have to make choices for presenting most relevant and essential elements for the treatment of the subject. Now, just to remind you, where is Central Asia on the world, on the map? But I know you pretty well know that for now. Let's see also a map that you can also be acquainted with is the Central Asian states with their neighbors. So here from the south, Iran, Afghanistan, then Pakistan, China, Russia, and from the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus states. So you see, they are all neighbors of Central Asian states. And all other international actors are located far away, maybe not far, like Turkey, for instance, which is relatively culturally close to Central Asia. But anyway, there are no common frontier. It's important to keep that in mind. So now, let us look at the research question that are at the basis of my presentation. First, how Central Asian states have entered the international community since the moment of their independence. They're, let's say, coming out in the arena, international arena. Second question, how each of them have built its own foreign policy, FP, and enter into a dialogue with foreign partners from 1991 until 2020. Third question, what doctrines have been driving these states for 30 years? And finally, the fourth question, how can one explain these choices and analyze their cause and consequences at various levels? It's not an easy task, but we'll try to make it. So now, let's see the plan of the presentation. The presentation will be divided in two parts. After introductory remarks, we'll have 3 chapters: global context, regional level, domestic level, and then the second part with the presentation, very brief, but trying to be incentive, of the 5 FP of the 5 Central Asian states. So let's begin with 2 introductory remarks. The first one, I would call it the pressure of immediate history. I must say that the video recording of my chapter is taking place sometime after the end of its writing. So I've decided to introduce some elements of updating on facts occurring after 2020 anyway, because I thought that it was crucial to understand the international conjuncture at short term. So where are we going? Where are the Central Asian states engaged? Not to be obsolete at the end of my chapter. So I thought that it was not possible to have complete the overview of this long period of beginning of independence, 30 years, without sketching the current turning point of the pandemic, for instance, and also without quoting the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan after 20 years of presence. So don't be astonished that I will quote these events. The second point is the theoretical framework. In order to better explain how the Central Asian foreign policy were elaborated, we will use the theory of neoclassical realism as formulated by, for instance, Noreen Rispsman, Jeffrey Taliaferro, Stephen Lobel in 2016 in their book entitled Neoclassical Realist Theory of International Politics. This framework seems appropriate to deal with international relations in post-Soviet space, and if we consider that the role of state is remaining crucial anyway, we will be able to show the linkage between internal characteristics such as leaders, regime, elites, with the ways these countries, this government conduct their military, diplomatic and economic policy. So a 3-scale analysis will be used to go slightly beyond the state-centered approach by introducing the global context, then the regional context, and then the domestic factors at work. In other words, to enter or to try to enter the FP black box of each state. So now let's go quickly to the global context created by the global actors, and also just mention the medium-sized actors. So the global actors, as you know pretty well, are the USA, the Russian Federation, People's Republic of China, and the EU. Medium actors in Central Asia, we can quote Turkey, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Japan, India, Pakistan, and so on. We will not go in detail on all this. I would just to stress some important facts. To better structure the period, I felt mandatory to structure it in chronologic frame. So let's just divide the period, the 30 years period, into 3 phases or 3 decades, let's see, with 3 turning points, just to have a better idea of what are the major events that could influence each FP. The phase 1, the first decade, from 91 to 99. This decade is mainly devoted to global, local, and regional even impact of the collapse of Soviet Union, along with its political, economic, social, and psychological consequences on the positioning of all actors, meaning that every actors, global or regional, of course, national actors in each countries were totally impacted by the collapse of the Soviet Union and the crisis that occurred during the first decade. The second decade is intense at the global, also global, regional, and national levels, because it begins with the 9/11 in the United States as the first turning point. You remember I said 3 turning points. So the first was 9/11 for the period, followed by the American military invasion of Iraq in 2003, continues with the tulip revolution in Kyrgyzstan and events in Indonesia in 2005, and the subprime crisis, which is global, in 2008, and finally ends with the second Kyrgyz revolution in 2010. You see, in this decade, you have a mix with global events and local events, and it is also very important to just keep that in mind. The third phase, it's the third decade, begins with social unrest in Kazakhstan in 2011, and with the launch of the Chinese initiative One Belt, One Road in 2013, the creation of ISIS in 2014 as a turning point, second turning point, followed by the Russian annexation of Crimea, the start of American withdrawal from Afghanistan, and continues with the COVID-19 pandemic and with the third revolution in Kyrgyzstan at the end of 2020, opening a third turning point, COVID and, we'd say, the withdrawal of American troops in Afghanistan. This is third turning point. So also, you see the mix of global events, regional events, and local events. So this chronological interlacing, mixing events on the global and domestic scale constitutes the breeding ground in which the choices and achievements of all actors in the diplomatic, strategic, and economic posture will be inscribed. Numerous, and now let's have a look very shortly to the multiplicity of actors that came into the play after the collapse of Soviet Union and growing. Numerous state actors in the field of international relations rushed into Central Asia and sought to position themselves right after 1991, aiming to exert political influence and accessing new markets. These actors include major powers, as mentioned above, and also middle-sized ones, as I told already. Also, we can have non-state, we can just stress that we have non-state actors in the region as well, such as financial institutions, World Bank, Asian Bank of Development, European Bank of Development, etc. Multinational corporation, American Chevron in oil sector, Canadian Central Gold for mining, South Korean Daewoo for car industry, etc. All these major enterprises rushed into Central Asia. It was a big change because before we couldn't see that. And also a very big change in of the situation was the coming of NGOs, like Soros Open Society, for instance, or smaller NGOs from America, from Switzerland, from many countries, and also new religious movements also coming in the region, like evangelists or Tabligh Jamaat. Of course, it's just an example. All had to adapt themselves to local conjuncture, to discover the region, because they had no idea of what is going on in the region. They have idea, fantasy about the region, but they had to understand what was going on and to follow their own agenda, negotiating continuously with the new old elites on which they strive to implement their soft power. So the soft power is the power smooth, which can implement a real good policy without any harsh attitude. Now we will give some elements to characterize each global actors of the ER in Central Asia by trying to identify the point they have reached after 30 years. So I will be short to characterize the major global actors. USA in Central Asia, very far from Central Asia, as an hegemonic power, was at the beginning very much beneficial from the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it has gained a foothold in this strategic space, backing Afghanistan, China. USA first helped Kazakhstan to get rid of nuclear heads, this is a point, and then focused on the war against terror after 9/11, and then became obsessed by Afghanistan, this is for sure. So, president after president in USA, the total withdrawal of its military forces was at the agenda, and this is a very important fact to think about for this major actor. The second actor, Russian Federation, is a historical tutelary power since the Tsarist colonization of Central Asia. And as you know, after the first decade of disengagement with Yeltsin, Putin came to power and regained a foothold in Central Asia, maintains his strategic and political interest in the entire region, after some consent with Uzbekistan. But the question is the alliance of Russia with China since 97 at the part of the Shanghai groups and then the organization of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, his alliance will stay. This is reasonable wording, will stay or not? This is a question. Russian Federation is still engaged in keeping security in Central Asia, and as I was in Bishkek for the last 4 years, I can notice that every year Putin was coming to the small Kyrgyzstan. He came himself. So it shows that he was not neglecting any state of Central Asia just to have the foot on it. And people, let's see, the taxi driver, as you know in Central Asia, you get a lot of information from the taxi driver, you get the mood of the population. They were welcoming Putin. It's a strong leader. They are so lucky, the Russian, to have this strong leader. It's not like us in Kyrgyzstan. We are fragile, we are weak. Lish by Nazarbayev. At least Nazarbayev, they said. Look, at that time it was Nazarbayev was still the president of Kazakhstan. So this is for Russian Federation. Third, the China's People's Republic of China, rising power, close neighbor, a lot of 1,400 kilometers frontier with Kazakhstan, 800 with Kyrgyzstan, 300 with Tajikistan, the real neighbor. And the real problem, let's say, because we must say that there is a strong feeling of xenophobia in Central Asia. So we cannot just put the major actor like China just saying that they are doing what they want. It's definitely an issue. The question is whether China's soft power, because China tried to exert soft power, and with the COVID-19 it tried to do something in this matter, will definitely impact Kazakh and Kyrgyz xenophobia and by extension foreign policy. For the fourth actor, the European Union. It's a very interesting European Union. I was the witness of the rise of the image of European Union, and it took almost 30 years for European Union to get a real good image in the countries of Central Asia, although it was a very generous donor, as it's in fact. So until the conception of the second strategy of EU towards Central Asia, which was presented in Bishkek in 2019, in July, I was present at that moment, the image was a little bit diffused like that, not really as a model. And now I can see that definitely EU is trying to show itself like an alternative political and cultural model to those model of China and Russia, and trying to present other projects than the neighbours projects. For instance, the creation of a more efficient regulatory system in the field of service, security, connectivity, and transition to green and diversified economy. So this is the priority of European Union. I will not go on detail with medium-sized actors. I must say that the major medium-sized actor in Central Asia actually seems to be Turkey. It was that at the beginning, then it was like a little drop, and thanks to the Karabakh problem and the victory of Azerbaijan with the help of Turkey, Turkey is like coming back again to Central Asia with this influence and is able to speak himself to China without Russia. And it's a little bit interesting to observe this very recent prospect. So Turkey is also the most visible foreign influence in Central Asia, except from the great mosque in Dushanbe, which is made by Saudi Arabia. But the great mosque in Bishkek is definitely a copy of Süleymaniye, also from Istanbul. So it's visible, the Turkish presence is visible with university, with the stores, with religious buildings and so on. So now we go to the regional level. Since their independence, the states of Central Asia have been strongly encouraged to initiate regional integration processes. And if you could know how many PhD they were made in Central Asia about the EU organization as a model, do the same. But anyway, it didn't work so much. Indeed, the Central Asian states have created some regional organizations, but fragile structures, not very operative. The only regional organization that seems to be more active is involving China and Russia. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization and also the Eurasian Economic Union with Russia and other members of the former Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. However, we can point three areas where the 5 countries have shown regional solidarity. You could say 3 is very poor number, but it's still three cases. The name of the region, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you had the Middle Asia and Kazakhstan. And they were, in '93, the leaders of the 5 states reaffirmed the region as Central Asia. They were agree with that, it seems. Then the nuclear issue was also a consensual decision, which demonstrates a regional approach shared by all of them, including Turkmenistan. Kazakhstan was the initiator, and then the Treaty of a Free Nuclear Zone was adopted, and so on, at the General Assembly of UN in '97, and then in 2000. The third, and all the countries have signed this treaty. One other project I found, just to see they all signed for the project, was the creation of the International Fund to save the Aral Sea. So even Turkmenistan signed this project, and maybe there could be some other project, but these are the main projects they definitely signed. Otherwise, some of them signed, and always Turkmenistan is refusing to sign. However, we can say that a more positive assessment is emerging in the region after the advent of the new president of Uzbekistan, Mirziyoyev, in December 2016. And the pandemic, maybe the 2020 pandemic, I mean the COVID-19 crisis, might have a positive impact on, we will have to check that, if the Central Asian states will think about the regional issue or the way to solve some problems. So maybe that would force them to think neighbor, then think of a plane coming from far away. Let's point out why. I wonder why we can check this poor result of regional integration. So just to have an idea, just to better structure this idea, this question, let's have a look to the given and the risk that can answer partly this question. So I take some idea established by the Seneca conference in Almaty in January 2019 in order to prepare the EU strategy in Central Asia I was talking about. So people were gathering and trying to find what are the given of the region that explain the situation and also adding the risk the region is submitted to. So given was like geography, constraints, climate, borders, accessibility, landlockedness of almost all Central Asian states, with a lot of problem with enclaves, exclaves, all that is a given. And another one was the climate change. The consequences of global warming on socioeconomic well-being. There are a lot of water in Central Asia, in Pamir, but when this water will disappear, unfortunately at a certain moment, what's next? This is a good question. Another given is the rising of population and urbanization also. So growth rate is impacting identities issues and economic issues and so on. Central Asian states, the South one, are very, very young. Majority of the population are less than 18 years old. So how we will feed them, give jobs, and etc. So this is a big problem. Also, given the common historical heritage from the past, from the Russian Tsarist period and then the Soviet period, makes Tajikistan not similar to Afghanistan nor Iran. So this is the point. I will add myself one given, it's the competition for foreign investor and markets due to the fact that they have all raw materials, always the same materials to offer. So they are competitors in the region. All these aspects just mentioned articulate to the weakness of political institutions across the region, increase the risk of instabilities. So, beside this given, Central Asian states have to deal with risk factors. After the collapse of USSR, Tajikistan was the only Central Asian state, even the only Soviet states, post-Soviet states, which had to manage a civil war, which is a risk. And the Taliban issue in Afghanistan at that very moment, 20 years ago, was also a big risk. The global security problem of terrorists after the 9/11 was a risk in the region, although we can note that the number of terrorist acts are less in Central Asia than elsewhere. This is also an interesting point. Although we figure out that it's a terrible children, that boiling one, and in fact, the reality is quite different. And the rise and fall of ISIS, also a risk, major risk, because the young adults in the region, some of them, few of them left to go to ISIS. all left to go for work, working migration in Russia, and from Russia or from Turkey, left to ISIS. And then the fall of ISIS makes them coming back home. It's also a risk problem. They are now, most of them in prison, in the green prison, as they said in Central Asia. The Islamic prison are green. And the green prison is like a laboratory of, like everywhere, of creating new jihadists. So this is a very important question. Then we have the Central Asians have to solve a lot of economic and financial problems inherited from Soviet times. The interweaving supply system, food, fuel, electricity, it's not solved anyway now. Environmental issues, RLC, crisis, interstate water share. The water is going from Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan to Uzbekistan, which is using 50% of the total water of Central Asia for its cotton. So what? Uzbekistan says it's God. We don't want to buy the water because it's God present. And the Tajik and the Kyrgyz said, no, you must buy them. So it's a lot of very specific problem, but it's a very big risk. Although it's, for the last years, the situation is getting better, a little bit better. The legal aspect of the border delimitation, commercial transit routes, tax regime, transnational crime, narcotics, smuggling, these are all risks. So, no, one thing more to that part, I point two risk factors: Afghan syndrome and Uyghur problem. So I will not go in detail on that because you will read them in the chapter, but Afghanistan, like a neighbor of Central Asian, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan at least, it's a major risk for the region. At least view in the mind of the president of Central Asia. The one who is the most terrified by the Afghan syndrome is the Tajik president. For 30 years, has been at power from 92. When he comes to Paris or everywhere, he's just complaining and is just giving its idea about the danger of being neighbor of Afghanistan. And now, with the withdrawal of American troops, is even more. Uyghur issue, I will not go in detail, although I consider that it's a very big problem in Central Asia, because in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, in Uzbekistan, you have communities, Uyghur communities, and they are absolutely lost by the situation, and they cannot have any support from the national government. They are absolutely no link with China, and they cannot have any news anymore with their family. So now go to the domestic level, and this is the more interesting thing. The domestic level, the national frame where the foreign policy was established. I mean, the toolbox used by political leaders, actors, who themselves have to compose with the Soviet legacy, because they are born in the Soviet Union, they were born in the Soviet Union, they were educated in the Soviet pattern, and they have to deal with a globalized world and with new elites and young generation speaking English, running in internet and social network, and they are just a little bit disconnected anyway. But they are old, and in Central Asia you are old, you have the wisdom to be respected, and so far the young generation is keeping low down. So The political elite, who access to power, as I said, was brain under Soviet rule, and they had to brand their national state. This is an expression of Erika Marat. Brand the national state, but I mean, they did it very easily. I have no time to explain why they did it easily. They were prepared to do it easily, always, although it's not saying like that. And in the Soviet time, during Brezhnev time, nobody would just imagine that it would be independent at a certain point. But they were really prepared to assume the independence they didn't fight for. And they had also, this elite, these political elites, old Soviet, old style, to bargain with a growing influence of multinational firms, energy majors, and non-governmental agency. Even the idea of civil society for them was absolutely a shock. Anyway, we have to keep that in mind. Now they are okay with that, but at the very beginning it was difficult to just to admit that. And they had to invent a sustainable legal environment to reassure investors, to convince to come and to invest in their raw material, beside the fact that they were, all of them, just under the pressure of the syndrome of dispossession. This is quite interesting. They was in a very interesting mood because they want to attract investors, and also they didn't want to see all their goods going away. So this influenced the foreign policy. They said no tax during a certain time, and after a certain time, taxes. This was the way they decided to act. Also, there is a growing role of the interest groups in Central Asia, as elsewhere. The groups surrounding the leaders in each country and force him constantly to play the role of arbiter, especially in a country like Kazakhstan. In some other countries, the interest group were just a little bit silent, like in Turkmenistan, in Tajikistan. Over the years, dissensions came, including within the family of the president. And this is also interesting to point out. So let's see the role of political leaders in Central Asia. They have a strong influence. They make the propaganda of their own charisma in the media because they detain all the media anyway. Their vision and the practice, authoritarian practice, also is based on the own view they have. They must be the indisputable leader. This is a very important point because at the very beginning, the elaboration of the foreign policy was absolutely, entirely under their hand. Of course, with counselors, with the help of foreign people, that's no doubt. We have the name of the people who helped Kazakh leader, Uzbek leader, and so on. Interesting names you will read on the chapter. I will not say that today. But this is interesting to see that all these presidents, the new one in Kazakhstan, after Nursultan Nazarbayev, who apparently resigned in 2019, the only country where you have two presidents. One of my PhD Kazakh students said, in Kazakhstan we have the president, Tokayev, and we have the president of the president, Nazarbayev. This is quite interesting. Islam Karimov in Uzbekistan, after his death, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, former prime minister, very strong man, appearing like a very smooth one. I don't know how it's possible, but if people remember that he was definitely the prime minister of Karimov, but Karimov never mention his prime minister anyway. But it was in this place. So there is no president like showing up like that. Everything was under control anyway. It was not the same with the last one, the Turkmen one, who actually, after the death of Niyazov, the first president of Turkmenistan, it was his friend, his dentist, and he found him dead. He found him dead, like in Soviet Union. You find the dead, you are the next general secretary. So it worked like that. Although, on the point of view, official point of view, constitutional point of view, it shouldn't be like that, right? Then we have at the middle the most stable president of Tajikistan from '92, Imamali Rakhmonov, who became Rahmon recently, cut off the Russian one to Tajikified his name. And near to him, the youngest president of Kyrgyzstan, the seventh one, Kyrgyzstan being the only country where we have a lot of presidents, including a woman, 2 years. I will not go on the first years of independence where the major economic crisis was occurring in the Central Asian states. When I was talking with people about the crisis after COVID or during COVID, almost people say in Bishkek that it's nothing compared to what it was after the collapse. So maybe it's a good news for now. They considered this president, or even the one before the dying, considered that what remained of the Soviet socium resurfacing after '91 under the name of civil society was a creation of the West a little bit, the technology of politechnology of the West. And they tried to deal with that, as they know how to deal with that, to find the opposition, to expel opposition, and to clarify, etc., etc. This is the way they were doing. It is not surprising that the first reaction toward any social and political events in their country, they trace a foreign origin, all of them, as it was during the Soviet time. So it's a mentality, something is saying that it's foreign origin before saying that, okay, it's from inside, maybe. The second reaction will be for them to surround themselves with close relatives, just to ensure the loyalty, because they fear of the treason. They are afraid of, they are in power and they feel the fear of power. So they have to be surrounded by son, daughters, son-in-law. It's less good, but anyway, it can work. And even sometimes preparing them to succeed. Like, for instance, in Tajikistan, I guess it's a process. It's not working anyway. The poor president has daughters, so it's not so good. In Uzbekistan, it was not so good, at least. Fortunately for the researchers and for you students, you can read the narratives, the books of the president. They are so numerous, even if they don't write them themselves. But anyway, they sign it. This is their books. And Nazarbayev has 16 books signed. It's very interesting to read them. The Turkmen book, Rukhname, it's a piece of anthology that we have to work on. And in Tajikistan also, in the National Library, you have books signed by the president. They express themselves. It's a major source of information about what they have in mind. If we want to go to the toolkit, we have to go to the head of them. So don't forget to read them. And finally, all sectors of Central Asian societies had to take account about the massive arrival of external actors. This is a very, very important fact. See that in Kyrgyzstan, so many NGOs, in Tajikistan, in the Fergana Valley, and so on, many. This is the most challenging issue for the political sustainability of the post-Soviet elite, because they are afraid of what ideas they can just disseminate. The generalization of internet and the access to social networks have dramatically deepened the integration of the Central Asian states and their respective society into the global world, and as elsewhere, internet is a space of contestation of the leaders, the authoritarian leaders and their entourage. So they had to control the internet system to control the society. So this is a big, very, very important fact, and they never cut it, definitely, but they are very, very good to know what is going on. The security service are very okay in these countries. So I'm going to skip all this and just say at the conclusion of this section that Central Asia, and the first part, the Central Asian society have experienced numerous changes over 3 decades, even in very conservative and closed states such as Turkmenistan. These changes have been provoked by a succession of crises, economic shock, from the collapse of Soviet Union, Asian crisis, subprime crisis, etc., up to COVID-19 crisis. Central Asian societies are fractured, are divided along a dividing line between a growing share of population claiming strong attachment to Islam, partly composed of reborn Muslim, following paths of Salafization and conservatism, and in the other side of the society, a small fraction of urban middle classes still sensitive to Western liberal discourse and practice. And this might impact further development of the foreign policies on the fourth decade, I can say. Now, just have one example of the reaction of the civil society in Kazakhstan. I took this example from a very, very recent demonstration against Chinese influence in Almaty in Kazakhstan, but this manifestation can be traced in Kyrgyzstan as well, and that is a very clear way to understand how, for instance, the Kazakh government change is land law, not giving to Chinese, to foreign people, the capability of install themselves in many, many hectares of Kazakh land. And this is a society, the civil society, that pushed the government to change the internal policy, which has reflexive consequences in the FP, that is for sure, with China. This is one example, very clear, we can trace. There are some others, but I can say it's very recent. It's maybe the last decade from 2011, 2014, the beginning of this kind of issues. So now, quickly, let's have the second part, which will be quick, much quicker than the first one, where I must give you some information about the 5 states of Central Asia concerning their foreign policies. Of course, I will not go in detail, just to point out some interesting features. Of course, at the very beginning, all the countries joined the UN in '92 and joined the major organization, world organization. That's for sure. They also, let's say, joined the World Trade Organization, for example. Let's just mention Tajikistan in 2013, Kazakhstan in 2015, and Turkmenistan asking to do so just right now, which is a very interesting feature, showing that it's trying to go out anyway, just now. This gradual integration to global trends was, of course, perturbed by the COVID-19. I mean, we were almost at the moment that, okay, they are all integrated, and so much integrated that they are all, except from Turkmenistan, which denied to have any case of COVID-19, all the 4 Central Asian states are a part of the global pandemic. And they close the frontier. That's very interesting to observe that. And I immediately was thinking about a new research idea program just to look at the reopening of the frontier and who is dealing with whom. Because it's unique moment, it's a unique moment in the history of this region, when even in the history of the world, of the modern world, that we close, we shut down, every planes are on the ground, and then we reopen. How we reopen, and this is interesting. So, further PhD on the I think will be interesting. So, let us now just see very briefly Kazakhstan. 19 million inhabitants, considered as a success story of Central Asia, winner of the competition with Uzbekistan after a few years, position of peaceful state. This, I put the pyramid of concord and interreligious, intercultural peace and so on, by the architect Norman Foster, apostle of denuclearization, and wishing to dialogue with all partners, which derives the concept of multi-vector policy. Multi-vector policy is from we want to speak with anybody and we want peace. President Nazarbayev, the first one, who was the title of the first president of Kazakhstan, former secretary of Kazakh Communist Party, show a political sense, pragmatism, and a lot of ambition for his country to be among the 30 or the 50 best, wealthy states of the world, and they want to. Anyway, they want to avoid the only dialogue with Russia or China. So the multivectorial policy is absolutely crucial. Also, they invent a concept of we are the bridge from Asia to Europe, and we are definitely keen to have a role of mediation. So they are very, very proud of hosting a lot of conferences on peace and to initiate peace processes, like, for instance, the Astana peace process for Syria. Finally, for Kazakhstan, you see, I'm very short for each country. Kazakhstan is the only country of Central Asia where xenophobia and Russophobia coexist, slightly, which is a sign of how public opinion is gaining authority and importance in this country. Now, Uzbekistan. With nearly 30 million inhabitants, Uzbekistan is the most populous country. The most populous country of Central Asia, a very young country, as I said, and double landlocked, bordering the 4 other states of Central Asia, plus Afghanistan. It is, big deal. It suffered, Uzbekistan suffered from a bad image, international image, under the power of President Karimov, in particular after the events, indigent events in May 2005. Although the former secretary of Uzbek Communist Party, Islam Karimov, was president who implements a gradual reform called the Uzbek way, and by fear of falling under the influence of foreign actors, chose multi-vector strategy. I would say by default, the contrary of Kazakhstan to a certain point. They want to avoid influence, and the other, they just want to not to put their eggs in the same basket, I would say. But the result is the same name, multi-vector. At the beginning, Uzbekistan had apparently given priority to Central Asian states, although under Karimov, the relations bilateral were very, very bad. And they are just getting better since the event of the new president. He had also a strategic hesitation for 30 years between Russia, USA, and finally Russia and China. It's also it's a kind of problem with the international and Western partners. But now with Mirziyoyev, the reintegration into the international community seems to be done, despite the maintaining a rotation towards Russia and China. Now, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan, I love Kyrgyzstan, is one of the poorest and the most landlocked country of the former Soviet republics. A young state of 6.5 million inhabitants. A special case among the 5 countries of Central Asia from the point of view of domestic politics. 7 presidents, including a woman, I said, and considered as a semi-democratic island. 2 revolutions, a lot of problem and stability, but people who are absolutely keen to go out on the street and say their opinion. They are not afraid of anything, and they just demonstrate. And the fact that the new president was just taken from jail, Sadiq Japarov, and put go to the elections, and now he's a president. It's a fact that they can do it. The bad news is this president just changed the constitution and abolished the constitutional republic with a good place for parliament. Even the parliament was all deputies that were corrupted, that's more or less, but still this kind of republic. And now it changed back to presidential republic. But let's see how long it will take. It will last. In '94, I asked a Kyrgyz political scientist myself during a conference, why are you the most democratic state in Central Asia? She replied, very cynically, because we have nothing to sell. Nothing else to sell. I was always thinking about that. Later, I asked a Kyrgyz prominent economist the same question. Why are you so free in comparison? So décontracté, you say in French, in comparison with your neighbors. And this economist said, because we don't have enough natural resources, so we have a very scarce elite group. So in comparison with the Kazakhstan. So we are nothing to sell, definitely, and nothing to keep. Nevertheless, Kyrgyzstan attracted many NGOs, maybe the most in Central Asia, and it's still now of a strong competition for soft power between various international actors, and it's definitely pretty much in depth on China's banks, that's for sure. And also, until the COVID crisis, he had like 33% of given by the remittances from Russia. So it's a very fragile state. Now, Tajikistan. Tajikistan, the only Iranian-speaking republic in Central Asia, the other being Turkic-speaking. The population in 2020 estimated at 9 million, with a majority of Tajik, 84%, 13%, almost 14% of Uzbek. The poorest country of Central Asia, and the only country which suffered from civil war, I said, and which this civil war conditioned the construction of the independence the first decade strongly in the orbit of Russia, and then a little bit less. Now more than 50% of external debt is Chinese, and definitely Tajikistan wants to enlarge the number of foreign actors. He wants to diversify partners and opportunity, not alienating Russia officially and China. And he is claiming also a multi-vector, third multi-vector policy for Tajikistan, but from different constraints, from different point of view. Tajikistan has priority strategic objectives, food security, acceleration of industrialization, and also impact of external ideologies. So Tajikistan has to diversify partners and opportunities without alienating Russia and China, and also to respond to priority strategic objectives. So energy independence and food security, and also to fight against external ideologies. Tajikistan is a very politicized country. In fact, we have just to think about the last decades of the Soviet period, and Tajikistan was the place of Soviet Union where you can find the more original people, original thinkers, people that were expelled from Russia, expelled even from Uzbekistan, and went to live their life in Tajikistan. And this is the reason why, and also it was the country with a lot of people living in the country, and a lot of people absolutely oriented toward Islam. So the civil war occurred not just like that, and this is a very interesting point. We have to think about a lot of people from Tajikistan went to ISIS, even from the national forces, and I especially choose this kind of provocative picture. It's a man, it's a jihadist, and it's going to Syria and Levant and Iraq, and there are a lot of problems like that in this country. So Tajikistan, as I said before, is greatly impacted by Afghanistan, the situation in Afghanistan, and as you know, maybe almost all the 1,000 kilometers, out of 1,400 kilometers of the Afghan-Tajik frontier, almost 1,000 is taken by the Taliban today. And some people from the official forces of Afghanistan are escaped in Tajikistan. So, they are definitely concerned. And this is the reason why just recently Tajikistan got closer to Iran, although before he had very bad relationship with Iran. And now, considering the threat of coming back of Taliban, they have to secure a little bit their Iranian relations. And also Tajik migrant workers in Russia send 50% of the GDP until the COVID crisis. So this is a big deal, and the country is definitely fearing the development in Afghanistan. And finally, Turkmenistan. the only country where the practicing a kind of multi-level doctrine for the foreign policy, but saying officially that it's permanent neutrality. This is interesting. 6 million inhabitants. The Turkmenistan developed a specific path as the authoritarian and conservative country based on the concept of first positive neutrality that became permanent neutrality, to distance itself from Russia and other foreign influence also, but also practicing open door policy. This is a very big contradiction, but it's in fact it's not contradiction. It's the same that doing multipolar strategy and trying to escape bad influence. It appears as the less active country on the international scene until recently, when it is going to make a rapprochement with EU and with the World Trade Organization. In ISO, he attended meetings, consultative meeting of Central Asian head of states, and is engaged to integration process and also participate to a video conference organized by the non-aligned movement to discuss the COVID pandemic, although it denies to have any case. So little by little, Turkmenistan is acknowledging the need of going out its own frontiers. So, but it's a very interesting country, very unusual, with the cult of personality of the first president replaced by the cult of personality of the second president, who was showing himself more Muslim than the first one, who was a communist leader in the Soviet time, and dare to make statues of himself, which is not mandatory for Islamic law to represent himself in a statue. This is why I put especially the poster of the current president of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who is showing himself in two dimensions in a poster because he's a good Muslim. So you can just see it. Conclusion, finally. So we acknowledge that Central Asian states are a part of the global community after becoming a concept, a geostrategic concept, and being, let's say, Soviet periphery during 70 years. 30 years of independence were enabled to assert their identities, state identities. They are all different. And they have a lot in common, the uniqueness of their historical experience, part of Genghis Khan Empire, part of Timurid Empire, colony of Tsarist power, Soviet Socialist Republic until 91. And this common heritage articulate to the cult of strong leader, the pragmatic social turnover, the Soviet inclusion while remaining Muslim, Soviet Muslim. Passive, sometimes active resistance against Soviet secularism, and they have created a unique ground of representation and behavior which constitute a link between these 5 Central Asian societies. 5 states with 5 specific paths after independence, and consequently 5 different FP, with similarities, of course. Maybe this period of 30 years was necessary to recycle the past, more precisely the Soviet heritage, in terms of domestic human resources, psychological representation of the good foreigner and the bad one. And maybe next, what will be next will be interesting because new. Second point, Central Asia, 4 +1 strategies for IFP. So we saw that the 5 Central Asian states pursue 5 different IFP with many common aspects, made in pragmatism, capacity to adapt themselves, to adapt what is expected from them, over evaluation of their economic potential, which is very useful to attract investors, their own strategic comprehension of geopolitics. They have a common denominator based on the open door policy, somewhat in quest of lesser evil policy, which could be expressed as follows. The Russians, we know them, we anticipate them, we speak like them, we think like them. The American, we don't trust them. The Chinese, we fear them. And now, recently, the Turks, we understand them. Not more, but even the multi-vector policies, which could appear identical in the formulation, is based on different constraints and strengths each country has highlighted. Not to mention the Turkmen doctrine of permanent neutrality, as I said, in addition to its refusal to enter into any military alliance, makes it practicing de facto a multi-vector policy like its regional neighbor. 3. Many challenges they have faced for 40 years since the COVID-19 pandemic. Central Asian states have faced internal and geoeconomic threats, and the Afghan endless war syndrome, the Uyghur issue, water security issue, Islamist terrorist issues. They are all suppliers of raw material and can therefore consider themselves in competition facing foreign demand. However, they do not seem to worry countries of East and Southeast Asia in terms of power and influence. They are perceived as empty heart of Asia. The new international situation that emerged from the global COVID-19 pandemic at all levels, economic, strategic, political, sanitarian, social, cultural, has necessarily impacted the IR in the 5 Central Asian states. A crucial question will be that of the rebuilding of an international order acceptable to the people and likely to respond effectively to the new economic and health threats, which are largely correlated with ecological and environmental questions. There is a global consensus about the need of act collectively, which first depends on the better understanding of the ER in Central Asia as elsewhere. New threats since the departure of American soldiers from Afghanistan and the exacerbation of international relations between China, US, and EU. President Biden's announcement on April 13, 2021 regarding the final withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan is likely to cause serious turmoil because of the comeback of the Taliban, which is ongoing process, and which seems to be entirely anticipated by the American power after having evaluated the positive consequences for the containment of Chinese influence maybe in the area, if they stay in Afghanistan anyway, the Taliban. According to some Russian experts on Afghanistan, the forthcoming departure of the already made departure of US troops does not necessarily mean the end of American presence, as negotiations are ongoing about possible new bases in the region, with Tajikistan, with Uzbekistan, in Pakistan, so they are maybe not so far from Central Asia, these soldiers. Persistence of Russian influence over Central Asia states for the time being. For the moment, Vladimir Putin, Russia does not seem to want to lose interest in Central Asia and largely provide security of Central Asia. The competition is about the question about China. If China wants to go on security issue in Central Asia, there is a rumor on the Chinese base in Pamir. Is it true or not? But there is a rumor in Badakhshan. So maybe the question will rise in a few months or years. And then the last question concerning the international relations in Central Asia is the real goals of the growing Chinese superpower. The question remains about the real intentions of China. So to go into the black box of the Chinese AFP is even more difficult than anything else. Will China be? Will Central Asia be a transit zone to be crossed to allow Chinese goods to reach European markets as quickly as possible? So build infrastructure, roads, bridge, and so on, just to pass quickly. Or is it a colonization area, Central Asia, for China, pushing towards the west, the last frontier of China in Central Asia, on the basis that it was like that before 751, before the Talas battle. So the big China, so nothing new, in fact. Is it that? Maybe. Is it what is in Central Asian mind? One Chinese diplomat already has said that Kyrgyzstan is China. Maybe he was not in good health, but he said that. So international relations are always a fascinating topic in Central Asia, like everywhere, but in Central Asia all the time, regardless of the period. The current period we are experiencing today is no less open nor uncertain. Thank you for your attention.